Hi, my name is Suzanne O'Neill, and this is my Module 3 on EDA and missing data. Today I will be discussing data management and analysis, specifically the identification and treatment of missing data and exploratory data analysis. So why do we do EDA? Researchers should explore their data before conducting hypothesis testing to avoid things such as distributional problems, scaling anomalies, and outlier observations. What is missing data? To find missing information, missing data can be intended or unintended to be collected, which is possibly relevant to our outcomes. So it's important to make sure that you're aware of what data is missing. Missing data creates skepticism because it can interfere with generalizability. Also, there can be two events or variables that have no direct causal connection, yet it may be wrongly inferred that they do due to a third unforeseen factor, and this is called the spurious effect, and that can pose as a threat to the validity of our results. Okay, so this particular data set represents 175 children who completed the WISC-4, and these are their various scores on the subtests of the WISC-4. So first I'm going to scan the data set visually just to see if we have any missing data. We don't. Also, you can go to variable view and look in the missing data column, and you can also see that we don't have any missing data there. So to start out with EDA, the first thing I'm going to do so I can get a feel for what my data looks like is go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies, then I'm going to look at the various subtest scores. I want to look at measures of dispersion, so I'm going to look at standard deviation, my variance, standard error. You can choose any of these if you'd like. I'm going to look at measures of central tendency, so the mean, median, and mode, and distribution, skewness, and kurtosis. I'm also going to check off a histogram so I can see what the distribution of my data looks like. Okay, so you can see here, again, this is another way to see if we're missing data. There's no missing data, but we can see that we have our mean across the various subtests, standard error, median, mode, so those are measures of central tendency, measures of dispersion or standard deviation to the mean, and variance. Then we have our distribution or skewness and kurtosis. And then here we have simple counts, so we can see how many test takers scored the various scaled scores on the test within each subtest. So we can see that 5 people received a scaled score of 4 on information, and that's 8%. And then down below, we have our histograms, and you can see that our data is normally distributed, and skewness varies, but it's generally pretty normally distributed data across the various subtests. Okay. So next I'm going to do correlations. Look at the relationships between the scores and the various subtests. So I'm going to go to correlate by variate. I'm only going to look at first four, so information comprehension, arithmetic, and similarities. Looks good. I'm going to do Pearson's R test. And this correlation matrix gives us the various relationships between information, these four subtests. So here we can see that correlations help us determine whether relationships are strong or negative. Where did it go? Okay, let me make sure the video is still running. Okay, here we go. Okay, so as we can see here, we have for comprehension and information, we have a positive relationship, and correlations range from +1, 0 and -1, 1 being strong, positively correlated, and -1 being strong, negatively correlated. So here we have all positive relationships. Anything with a double asterisk is a positive correlation, and that's significant at the 0.01 level. So arithmetic and information and comprehension are positively correlated, information and arithmetic as well, etc. Finally, I'm going to perform a regression analysis to see if one variable can predict the other. So here I'm going to see if coding can predict a score on comprehension, or excuse me, block design. Okay. Alright, so here our F. The first thing we look at is our F, which is insignificant. So we don't have a predictive relationship. We can also look at our unstandardized B, which is also insignificant. So we can conclude that coding or score on coding does not predict scores achieved on block design. Okay. Okay, moving on to discussing prevention strategies. In this case, prevention is the best possible strategy. You can do this by preparing ahead of time when you're developing your research design. Find out what adversely affects your subjects. When you're designing your measurement and how you're going to measure things and instruments, avoid skip patterns in places where people can skip questions or omit questions. When you're handling your data, handle your data with care when you're entering your data. Use consistent data entry protocol. Double check your data entry and make sure not to lose any important data. So it's all how you store your data is also very important. You can put in intensive effort, such as tracking down missing subjects and missing data. When you're diagnosing missing data, you want to determine what type of missing data you have. So there's 3 levels of statistical classification. That includes MCAR, missing completely at random, which is the best possible kind. And that can't be accounted for at all. where the data can't be accounted for at all. So there's Little's MCAR test that will test for this. All right, and you can't differentiate between missing at random and missing not at random data. So for missing at random, you will have to predict what is missing, and you can replace missing values through the expectation maximization test. And this test is used to find the maximum likelihood parameters of a statistical model in cases where the equations cannot be solved directly. And for missing not at random, we don't have a variable to predict what's random. So treatment for missing data relies heavily on diagnostics, such as the mechanism we use for treatment, the amount, pattern level. Those are all important when considering a method of treatment. So in this case, some things we want to look for are patterns, such as did people who are missing data or missing a subtest score complete the remaining subtest? Was the subtest even administered? Were there any patterns among the standard scores of that particular individual that could explain the missing value? Was it a problem with test administration, etc.? There are gender differences, like here we don't have a gender variable. Look at gender differences. And this is all hypothetical since we don't have missing data in this data set. But if we did, this is what we would do. For data handling, we have 3 models: deletion, imputation, and adjustment. For deletion procedures, one moment. For deletion procedures, we have list-wise deletion, which is when if the respondent has a missing value for any variable, then you omit the respondent entirely from the entire data analysis. We have pairwise, which is not as extreme, when the respondent is only dropped on analyses involving variables that have missing values. For imputation, we have single imputations, where you analyze other responses and look for the most likely value based on the various methods. And this is fine when you have a small amount of data missing. Examples include mean substitution, where you substitute the average value. Regression imputation, where you find a value based on the regression equation generated from other responses. And the last observation carried forward, where you use the most recent value that you do have available and generate a missing value based on that. Adjustment procedures include regression correction, which is Cohen's method, weighting procedures, model-based parameterization procedures. So in summary, when you're choosing a method, consider your data and analyses being conducted. Prevention is always the best option as opposed to the other methods you can use for treatment. And multiple methods should be used, conducted and compared. The most important thing is whatever you choose to use, make sure you report your findings and make sure that they're reported appropriately so they can be interpreted easily and replicated. So in my data set, if I had missing values and I chose to exclude cases list-wise, I would omit a respondent entirely from data analysis. I would report on methods used to prevent missing data, diagnostic information, treatment methods. In this case, is excluded list-wise, sensitivity results, and meaning I would compare to using another method, and then I would discuss the findings and interpret it and interpret it appropriately so it's reader friendly. Thank you.